referring to in this deposition as Mr. Depp or Depp?
I do.
And is this representation an attorney-client representation?
It is.
Does it include any other type of representation of Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege and attorney work product. You can't answer that question without disclosing communications between himself and his client, Mr. Depp. As you're aware, Ms. Bredehoff, the court has ruled that Mr. Depp has not waived attorney-client privilege and will not be waiving attorney-client privilege. So you're aware of that.
So, Mr. Chu, I'm not sure that you heard my question. I was actually asking him if he had any other type of representation relationship with Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client.
I think he can answer that yes or no, but I would instruct the witness on behalf of Johnny Depp not to disclose any communications you've had with your client.
No.
Actually asking him if he had any other type of representation relationship with Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client.
I think he can answer that yes or no, but I would instruct the witness on behalf of Johnny Depp not to disclose any communications you've had with your client.
What is your role in this case as counsel for Mr. Depp?
Objection. Sure. I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
Okay, I'll follow the instruction.
Did you enter into a written representation agreement with Mr. Depp when you began your representation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. That calls for attorney-client privilege.
Okay, I follow the instruction.
You entered into more than one representation agreement with Mr. Depp during the course of your representation.
Same instruction not to answer. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications and attorney work product.
Yes, ma'am.
Has the attorney-client relationship between you and Mr. Depp been severed at any point between October 2016 and the present?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds that you can't answer that question without disclosing attorney-client communications.
Okay, I accept the instruction.
And you have charged Mr. Depp for your advice, correct?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications, and the fee arrangement in any event is irrelevant. But I'm instructing him not to answer on the grounds of privilege.
I accept the instruction.
And has Mr. Depp paid you for your advice?
I do instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege. You can't answer that question without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Did your relationship with Mr. Depp, and I'm talking about your attorney-client relationship, deviate from those general principles that in some way Mr. Depp is not permitted to follow or reject your advice?
Would instruct the witness not to answer the question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Now, has Mr. Depp terminated your representation of him at any time between October 2016 and the present?
That's the same question that I instructed Mr. Waldman not to answer before, just stated in a slightly different way, so I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Now, and Mr. Depp, as the client in your relationship, is in the position to make the final decision regardless of your advice. Would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. I don't know that I know he can't answer that question without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp. So I instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
Now, your initial knowledge of the relationship between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard was based on your interviews with Mr. Depp. Would that be fair to say?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because he can't even answer yes or no without disclosing the substance of communications with his client, Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Depp terminate Tracy Jacobs as his agent before or after you became Mr. Depp's counsel?
Mr. Waldman, I would instruct you not to answer that question if doing so would require you to disclose any communications you had with Mr. Depp.
It would.
How long had Tracy Jacobs been Mr. Depp's agent at the time Mr. Depp terminated Tracy Jacobs?
And again, Adam, same instruction to the extent that that answering the question requires you to disclose communications that you had with Mr. Depp. I would instruct you not to answer the question.
It would.
Was it Mr. Depp's decision to terminate Tracy Jacobs?
Again, I would instruct you not to answer that question because that could only have come from Mr. Depp in the communication with you.
I accept the instruction.
Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company, would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it would require disclosure of communications between Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman as to who was advising who as to filing the case against TMG and the Mandel brothers. So I would instruct you not to answer that.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp have the ultimate decision making ability with respect to the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company?
And again, I would instruct you not to answer to the extent it requires you to disclose attorney-client communication.
It would.
What was your role in the UK litigation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it necessarily requires him or would require him to disclose his communications with his client, Johnny Depp.
It would.
You represented Mr. Depp throughout the UK litigation, correct?
Again, I would.
And Mr. Depp alleged in the UK litigation that the Sun, it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to bring the UK lawsuit against the Sun and Dan Wooten, correct?
And again, I would instruct the witness not to answer I would instruct him not to answer because it perforce would require him to disclose attorney-client communications as to the thought process that went into filing that particular lawsuit.
I accept the instruction.
And it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Amber Heard. Is that correct?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
As part of your representation of Mr. Depp, you contacted potential witnesses. Is that correct?
Again, I would. That is attorney work product, and that is protected in Virginia. So I would object on that basis, but you can answer that question yes or no.
Yes.
You also spoke with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf, did you not?
And I would instruct the witness not to answer to the extent that it requires disclosure of any communications between yourself and Mr. Depp.
It would.
How frequently did you communicate with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because impossible to do so without disclosing attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you communicate with the press?
Same instruction not to answer on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
What were you hoping to gain?
Same instruction not to answer the question.
I accept the instruction.
You remain Mr. Depp's primary counsel for all of his affairs. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer that because I don't think you can answer that without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp, and we have to be consistent.
That's true, and I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 3. Did there come a time in 2018 that you contacted Rolling Stone about writing an article about Mr. Depp?
And to the extent that you cannot answer it without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp, I would instruct you not to answer.
I think it would implicate discussions with Mr. Depp, so I accept your instruction.
Who first contacted Rolling Stone?
Mr. Depp.
I'm going to ask the question, notwithstanding, why did Mr. Depp contact Rolling Stone?
I would instruct you not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp authorize you to have communications with the Rolling Stone to set up this interview?
Instruct you not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.